I'll never forget, just an all-encompassing knowing. I don't want to say it was just a feeling, and it wasn't just a thought, but there was a moment in that time where I just knew the Lord was asking me to give him a lot of areas of my life.
Yeah.
And my vocation and what I would want to do with my life was one of those. And it was a very clear, louder than an audible voice of, Dave, it was a call to vocational ministry.
Alrighty, here we are, and guess what? Man, we landed a big one today. Tom Cruise is with us in this Top Gun himself.
Mission Impossible hat.
If you're listening on the audio podcast, you need to go back on YouTube because Dave Dooley looks... Dude, you're just the man. You look like you just crawled out of a plane. I love it.
He looks like he's coming off a Hollywood set right now.
Yeah.
Like this is his off-air interview.
And surprisingly, I don't know what to do with my hands.
just put them around. You're all right.
I think he was thinking that we had Brittany on. He was going to get out of doing one himself.
I was so hoping, man. This makes me nervous.
Full disclosure, I called Dave on the way into the office this morning. I said, "Hey, let's shoot a podcast." He's like, "Okay, I've got."
You're the boss.
Yeah. What do you
Is
say
that okay?
to him? No.
I said, "Well, Justin will have a hat on, so we can count on that."
right.
And I got a
That's
crew neck. So this is Dress Down Thursday. You're coming off of last night of N2, man. That was such a filling night.
It was. It was a really, really good night. And Emily and I just felt very loved on last night. Yeah. So, and this hat, all the youth signed their names to this hat.
So cool.
So this will travel with me for years to come.
Yeah. And that's a cool thing. And I think, was it Grace you said had a
Grace
shirt,
had this shirt on, and it was a picture of me from this past summer at NYC.
I thought it was from high school.
And someone came up to me. And they asked me, like, "Hey, how old were you in that picture on the shirt?" And I'm like, "Man, that was last summer."
Oh man.
A couple podcasts ago, we had Brittany on.
Yeah.
And had a conversation with her, and that was a delight. And so, wanted to have Dave on today and just introduce you to the podcasting world and connect with you, man. I know for you and I personally, I mean, our relationship probably goes back to a better part of a decade by now.
Yeah,
your guys' relationship always made me jealous. Like I remember as an intern, I just kept on hearing about Dave Dooley. And you guys even came here to NapNaz once. You guys were hanging out together, and I think Caleb was with you guys. And I'm like, man, I'm not in the cool kid group quite yet.
I don't know about that. We were just no, but we've been a part of some district projects. On our district, and so that's been cool to just get to know each other, get to understand how each other have worked, and this is first time guest that probably could make a pour over better than the B-roll footage that we show in our intro.
Yeah. I need to just redo your B-roll footage for you
because you are a coffee connoisseur. You have a refined palate for that, so that's what we bond about, actually.
Yeah, it is.
That
coffee.
And tech stuff.
Yeah.
So,
neither of which are things I'm involved in. So
yeah, that's all right. But you've got a wife that's bringing you into that world.
Slowly but surely, she's bringing me in.
Yeah. So talked to Chip the other day. He said he's like all black coffee now.
I don't believe it.
He assured me. So you have to find out.
I still take my chunky monkeys from Country Gourmet, and I am not ashamed of it. I am not ashamed of it.
It's such a weird
chocolate,
name.
Peanut butter, and banana. That's what goes in my coffee.
I don't think I, in good conscience, could go to a counter and say, "Give me the chunky monkey."
I used to be embarrassed. But
his wife
do you think we can just? Do you think we can have him just rename it to Justin?
You know what?
We will.
I might go ask him.
Yeah.
Because I would go order that sometime. I think.
I'd like the Justin Braun, please. The J. Henry.
We should ask him about that.
Well, man, we don't want to just talk about that stuff today. We want to get to know Dave Dooley. The man. And just hear a little bit about your story today.
Yeah, glad to.
And just open it up and just give people from our church an opportunity to hear what the Lord's done in your life, where you come from, and what He's doing now. So where do you want to begin?
Yeah, it doesn't matter to me. It's a lot. I mean, we could take up several podcasts.
I mean, you are
start from the
Nazarene
beginning.
through and through, man.
You are a Nazarene
am.
thoroughbred.
Like you are, for us, we're kind of, we didn't grow
Implants.
up explicitly. Yeah. But for you and your dad being a pastor, just have a different perspective and different upbringing than us. And I think that's neat and what the Lord's done in your life.
I would love to hear about your childhood as a PK and how that then shapes you into the man you are today.
Yeah. I didn't realize it till my mom. They never pushed me into ministry. Mom never was like, "You need to be a pastor." She just wanted me to follow after the Lord. But when I told her, I felt like that's what the Lord was doing. She went back when I graduated, and man, I'm in a generational line of pastors in both my mom's family. My dad would have been the first, I think, in his. But I have generations of relatives that have gone before me. That this was their call in life that I had no idea.
Yeah. And
so it's an honor to continue that. My mom grew up as a pastor's kid as well. Her father was a pastor. Her grandfather was a pastor. And it's all I've ever known, to be honest, is the church, and specifically, really, the Church of the Nazarene. Yeah. My dad pastored on this district in Paulding, Ohio. Came here shortly after I was born, I think 1980. Wow. And so it was my home church. It's all I ever knew growing up. Yeah. Was Paulding Naz, and it was a joy. I mean, as a whole, I didn't know anything any different. I loved it. We lived right next door. We had like 100-yard grass field between the house, the parsonage, and the church, and so it made a great football field, baseball field, track hunt. Dad I'd always want to race him to the church, and he'd always oblige and let me win. I have great memories growing up.
So what point in time then did you start anticipating maybe like this is the route I'm going to go down?
It wasn't while I was there, after Dad passed away, I'm just thankful for the Lord's provisions. Sometimes I think we wonder where we're at in terms of our salvation. So I came to an awareness that I needed to be saved at the age of 7. And it was just early. In fact, I tell people, I don't know that I ever really knew anything different than the Lord. And I'm so grateful for that, especially for parents that are raising their children that way. That's our hope for Nora, that she would never know a life without Jesus. Yeah. And but there were some years where I was just angry, very, very angry that the Lord took my dad. At least that was my perception, that God took him, and now we were just left to deal with life after.
So you guys were 11?
I was 12.
12. Yep. And, with that, you're living at the parsonage. So that does more than leave an empty place at the table. But that really upends your whole life. Yeah, it was tough. And, Mom is such a great example of really the work of the Holy Spirit. How she did what she did is not something I believe anybody in their human capacities could endure. In a parsonage, they needed a new pastor, and the church was so gracious to us and so kind, but that meant we had to move, and we didn't have anywhere to live, and so we moved into a very small apartment with my grandmother. Thankfully, we had moved her into the community after my grandfather had passed away, and she had a small apartment next to the school, and but. Out of all days, we had to move was January 1st, which also happened to be my parents' anniversary. So, Mom just, how she waded through all of that is just a testimony of God's strength. Yeah. And we moved into, it's humbling as a junior high kid to have to sleep in the same bedroom as your mom. That was not my choice. And so there was just I just had a lot of questions that weren't answered. Yeah. But I am so thankful for the Lord's consistent provisions of grace. Even though I was so angry at him, he just never stopped. Yeah. And man, I know we talk a lot about in our theological circles of what it looks like, in terms of salvation, and you're turning away from the Lord willfully. And I don't know that I ever turned away from the Lord, but I definitely
was not interested in him. And he just was always interested in me, thankfully. And so 4 years probably, I really struggled finding myself as an individual, as a person, and what that looked like. And man, the Lord was just good. The Church of the Nazarene in Paulding was so good to us. It's where my mom continues to go.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's really remarkable. And we had a great youth group with lay leaders when I was growing up, and I had just my best friends that were following the Lord. And my junior year of high school, the Lord really started to change my affections from anger back towards understanding that he had never left. And, that's a humbling moment when you realize he was always there, even when you didn't want him to be, kind of. And so, that's when it started to shift. But even through that, like you asked about my call, like I never wanted to be a pastor, not because I had bad feelings about it. It was not something I felt strongly about. And that didn't come honestly till my sophomore year at Mount Vernon. So that's a longer story of how I ended up there probably, but that was not my original intent, was to go to Nazarene University. It was to go to Ohio University and major in sports medicine. And
I don't think I knew that, actually.
Yeah, that was plan B after plan A was to join the Navy. That kind of failed, be in the Navy band. It's kind of a weird story, and it just didn't work out.
Yeah.
And so went to visit Mount Vernon in like May. Enrollment had closed to my knowledge, but thought I needed to go to a campus visit, and the Lord just made a way to take me in as a freshman. And I had a little rocky freshman year. I got, they're good people, but probably mixed up in things that weren't things I should have been mixed up in.
Sure. And
but man, even through that, I learned an awful lot. That's how I became acquainted with Napoleon. That's I met Scott Boyer, who was my roommate.
Yeah.
And Scott was just honestly, he was the best roommate I ever could have had. And not for any other reason. Scott was just such a godly guy.
Yeah.
Like he was willing to, man, I'm getting emotional here. He was one of the people willing to like tell me I was an idiot. Like, Dooley, you're doing things that I'm not sure honoring to the Lord.
Yeah.
And man, I'm really grateful for that. He and Danielle Denny, both of them were willing to say the hard things.
Two big NapNaz names.
Yeah, Tom and Sandy were so kind to me. I met them by coming over here some, and we carpooled, freshman, sophomore year. So, but Scott really, man, he just hung in there with me. Yeah. And my sophomore year, I was skipping chapel. We had chapel 3 days a week, and I needed some work I just needed to get done for a class, but I was listening to it on WNZR, home of the Cougars, and Dr. Sivrite
was... WNZR. You're listening to the Mount Vernon Cougar radio station.
See, you could have had a job, man. But
he's got a voice and a face for radio.
He does both, doesn't he?
Yeah,
yeah, just for radio. So those listening to the podcast, bless you. Those that have to watch it.
They're dealing with all three of us today.
It's terrifying. So yeah, it was not with good intentions, I guess, that I really was where I was at, but the Holy Spirit didn't need a chapel to speak to me. And I'll never forget, just an all-encompassing knowing. I don't want to say it was just a feeling, and it wasn't just a thought, but there was a moment in that time where I just knew the Lord was asking me to give him a lot of areas of my life.
Yeah.
And my vocation and what I would want to do with my life was one of those. And it was a very clear, louder than an audible voice of, Dave, it was a call to vocational ministry.
Yeah.
And that came at the end of my sophomore year. And it was so clear, I knew in that moment, obedience was what was necessary.
Yeah.
So I went to the registrar's office and told him what was going on. And Tom West was there at that time. He looked back at me, and he was so proud, but he also said, but Dave, I don't think you're going to be able to get this done in 4 years.
Yeah.
And so that was hard to hear. So I was at Mount Vernon 5 years and didn't have any additional things behind my, in front of my name, I guess, other than I went to school for 5 years to fulfill that call. And it was wonderful. Youth ministry was where I started and it never saw that as a means to something else. It was just fulfilling where I believe the Lord was leading me. So came back to serve in my home church. NapNaz, was there for almost 3 years.
So what was that like?
It's
Coming
great.
back to, I mean, you've
Yeah.
this is where you're at, right?
Yeah.
You just have come and
It's great. I learned a lot.
You were at Potting for 3 years?
Almost, yeah. I actually learned a lot through Pastor Keith Sarver.
Okay.
He was the pastor there, and Keith just mentored me. I was more of an associate pastor. I didn't know it at the time, but I mean, I went on hospital calls.
Yeah.
I went to funerals. Like, he just brought me into what ministry was.
Yeah.
And he let me preach.
Yeah.
And he entrusted people to me and kids to me, teenagers. And so that was a really great season of maturing. And
Sounds like a
life
very
for me.
similar experience that I've had over these last few years here.
Yeah, it was. So that was good, and then decided it was time to kind of go back to seminary, Weinbrenner Seminary in Findlay. Worked part-time with Youth for Christ, who was a real special part of my life growing up.
Yeah.
Steve Heilshorn was director and just a wonderful mentor then and friend to this day. And those were great years. And then, Brittany's in that whole mix. Met her, and then we
know her side of the
Yeah,
story.
we know her side of the story.
yeah, her side's a lot better than mine. So I'll let you guys decide how much you want me to squirm there.
I mean, so she goes to Indiana Wesleyan, right? And you guys are all kind of on your own paths and trying to figure stuff out here and there, and then eventually the Lord leads. You guys are back together and getting married, and the Lord leads you and moves in your life as a call to Kenton.
Yeah, I didn't think that was. I remember I felt I was serving in a friend's church, leading worship and doing youth and working with Youth for Christ, and it was another one of those clarifying moments for me where the Holy Spirit just spoke clearly. Like, I've called you to preach. This is great. He used that season in my life to lead worship and volunteer in a lot of areas. So I called, at that time, Dr. Fairbanks was the district superintendent, and I called honestly just asking, what do I need to do? Who do I need to serve with or alongside that can help me? And whether it was right or wrong, I remember him saying, well, Dave, I don't know if I just feel like this is the right thing to say right now. I may, we'll see, but there's a church in Kenton, Ohio that's looking for a pastor right now. Would you consider interviewing? And not what I anticipated, and in that moment, I think I was kind of shocked and just said yes. I'm not sure I would have said yes had I thought about it more. But I said sure, and honestly went thinking it's good to go through interviews. I hadn't had an interview in years.
Yeah.
It'd just be good to learn and go through the process. So I remember going to Kenton. I thought he said Canton. I had never heard
That's
of.
why you said.
Yeah, I'd never heard
Hall
of
of
Kenton.
Fame.
Right, never heard of Kenton in my life. I didn't know it was a city in Ohio, and so I did. I went and I met with the board, and man, they were so kind and so good.
And you're what, 27 years old?
I was 27. Yeah. I wasn't married yet. Brittany and I were engaged.
Okay.
And so this would have been in I want to say November, somewhere around there leading into Christmas. And so I went and the interview ended and I thought, okay, that was a really great experience for me. I didn't hear anything back. It was over a month.
Wow.
And I got a call from a gentleman, a number I hadn't, and he said, Pastor Dave, and nobody calls me Pastor Dave or Pastor Dooley. Yeah. This is Lowell Cahill from Kenton Church of the Nazarene. He's the board secretary, and he said, we just wanted to know if you were going to come be our pastor. And I remember going, Lowell, I didn't know I was invited to be your pastor. And Dr. Fairbanks had gotten sick.
Oh, man.
And the communication broke down. And so the board had communicated with him, we'd like to extend the call to Pastor Dave to come and he got sick and never conveyed that to me. Well, they then didn't hear anything back.
Oh, man.
And thought I didn't want to. And so I remember the weekend Brittany and I went It was so great. She came back on a Friday. There was a family in the church that was going to take her in, before we preached our it's like a trial sermon, know. And,
Tryouts.
Yeah, it is tryouts before the congregational vote. Brittany was so sick. She was sick as a dog. And so we're sitting
because of the circumstance, or
no,
she
had just gotten like the flu or something. And but man, we were there and we sat, it was this little church. There might've been on that Sunday, everybody came out, which was all of about 50 people to see who maybe the new pastor was going to be. And
the kid.
Yeah, it was, man. And people, they defined me as that in Kent. There were people that came and said, "Yeah, we like that church with the kid." And
that's hilarious.
I
love that.
Embraced it. But I remember sitting on that. They had pews, and I sat on that first pew, and they had music that was sweet and innocent, but not real great quality. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm sorry if anybody from Kenton's. I apologize. I love you guys. But they sang a song, Gentle Shepherd, which I have some interesting memories of that usually are not wonderfully associated memories. But the Lord redeemed that. In that moment, I heard that song, and I knew the Lord was calling us to Kenton, Ohio.
Wow.
And I looked over at Britt, and she just got tears. And we just knew. And the vote came back very positive, and we didn't even know what we were going to be making. You don't know financial. That's never a good question to ask. You just, okay, whatever the Lord's doing. And yet I'm getting ready to marry somebody and thinking, how am I going to take care of her?
Yeah.
And the treasurer, good friend of mine to this day, Brett, called and he said, Dave, just get here. Here's what we can do. Just get here and we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what they did. We got there and we just figured it out. And we did a lot of that together. The church was in decay. It had gotten whittled down to very, very few. Mm-hmm. And the district had started conversations about should they close its doors? Is it going to be able to thrive? Mm-hmm. And they just believed the Lord was leading in this direction, and so did we, Brittany and I. And it started a 15-year journey.
Wow.
That was like our memories. I mean, we got married. So I came in January of 2008. Brittany graduated April of 2008. We were married in May of 2008 and began our ministry. We had, went through the hurts there of like a failed adoption process within that was, they just loved us through it. The community loved us through it. We had Nora there. Yeah. So like our big monumental moments in life happened in Kenton, Ohio. So we'll always have just sweet affections for them.
Yeah.
But the church, my vision going in, I tell, if anybody out there is going, well, what's your vision for church? I heard that over and over again. And I got to the point where I said, my vision honestly is, Dave, just don't kill this church. Just don't kill it. Yeah. And I know that didn't sound like much, but they just needed loved.
Yeah.
And that's
loved
what we
back
did.
to health. I mean, because through that steadfastness and your just intentionality, so many have come to that church since then. Yeah. Finding hope, finding community, finding Christ.
Yeah, it was. And it was just love. And they needed some direction and some things. That's part of the reason why Brittany and I are here is the first time in my life I didn't have that sense of direction from the Lord on how to continually lead a people forward. Yeah. And while that was hard and had some hard wrestlings through there, we're certainly grateful. Yeah. The Lord's had his hand upon us, and man, just so great to follow him and trust him.
So without pushing any buttons that might be sore for you, what has it been like after 15 years of leading a church, then to move communities, to hear it employing? You're not the lead, you're the associate. You left 15 years of those core memories, those monumental memories in your life. What have these last 8 months been like for you and Brittany?
Hard, and I hope you'll hear me and hear our heart. When we say hard, that doesn't mean not good. It doesn't mean we don't love it, we don't like it. It just means it's hard. I don't know anything about horticulture. Ben, you're that guy, right? You love plants, but I would say it's a transplant, and there's a certain, I would guess there's a certain level of trauma that can happen when you uproot something and then plant it in another space where
Stuns it.
Yes. And stun is probably Ben, that's a great word. I think you can't prepare for it. And Justin, you and I have talked about this as you prepare. Like, you hear things, you can do your best, but I don't think we could have ever fully anticipated what it was like to leave. It feels like a death.
Yeah.
It really does. And I don't mean that nasty. It just feels you build all these relationships. You build not just surface level friendship, but deep. Like people you jump in front of a bus for, and they do the same for you.
Yeah.
That kind of relationship with people. And now I still have a few of those, which I'm thankful for, but it is different in context.
Yeah.
And I didn't anticipate how hard that would be. And then to remember what it's like to build relationships again. That's been like, oh man, we're starting over. What does this even look like? How do we begin? And the Lord's been teaching us through that. It's been good. We're honored to be in a place to just say, Lord, how do you want to do this? We're willing. Just teach us.
Yeah.
And He's given us time to do that. We're starting to see, I think, 8 months, some of that, where we're starting to see things here kind of start to overlap a little more of the ended relationships there. And we anticipate that will continue to happen. And we look forward to, just investing into the community and re-engaging in relationship. I think that's something, it's always been a part of my life. Brittany would tell you that. Dave loves being around people. And the last 8 months, I've loved being around people, but it's looked different.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was because I think I just had a hard time. I had to come to that place to say, oh yeah, these are different.
Yep.
So.
Yep.
Yeah, and back to the plant reference, I mean, the growth is stunted, but then the roots establish. The soul care, that it is well with my soul, though, becomes reestablished and begins to grow, and we don't see the quote-unquote fruitfulness right on the vine yet. Yeah. But the soul care, the emotion, the grieving, the processing, and then the Lord doing something new then follows that. Yeah. And it's 15 years at a place is impactful for everyone. And but we've all seen the faithfulness of God through everything, and you had mentioned being obedient to the Lord in your call, right? And knowing that I know that God is faithful in whatever He's calling me into, and this is your last day in the office, man, right? And Sunday, and by the time, then Sunday morning, and then beyond that, just answering the call and answering what's next, in your life. We're just signed on, and we know that the Lord's faithful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what a testimony between listening to Brittany's story and then now listening to your story of just how God does not stop pursuing.
Yeah.
And He will outrun you.
Yeah.
And He will chase you down.
Yeah.
So you might as well just say yes now.
Just give in.
But even how God can use the times of anger or resentment, pain, confusion, and hearing Brittany's story, how she would just give a little bit of herself over, and then just hearing how God took your anger, your feeling of resentment maybe, and turned it into understanding. Yeah. And even how you were able to then use that as a part of your ministry today. And I honestly, you are a pastor to pastors, and I felt that impact on my life. And I can't imagine how part of your story has been redeemed in the sense of you have such an amazing heart of empathy, and you can just come alongside others. And I can't believe that part of your story doesn't have something to do with that, and how God has redeemed that in your life.
I appreciate that, Justin.
Yeah, and I mean, you are a shepherd to people. And more than the coffee, more than the the tech stuff that we dabble in, there's a relational depth there. And I see you honestly as a sage,
Yeah,
as wise
yeah,
counsel
very
so
much
often,
so.
and moving into an area for me that we've all kind of entered into a new season over the last year. And, just the wise counsel that I've received from you so often. And, it's just been so timely, and you're always gracious about it. You have a way of using words is gentle
Brittany may
and
not
kind.
always feel that way.
We found out that incredible can be used in two different ways.
It's all in the
You're
tone.
incredible.
It's all in the tone, man. It's all in the tone.
Sometimes it's, what are you thinking?
What
That
are
is
you
You're
doing?
incredible. And sometimes it's great. And so you leave it up to the discerner to to understand, and the listener. But man, it's been good to have you on, and I'm sure we'll be doing many more of these together. But I think just as important for people in this church, just to hear your story and to hear where you've come from and what the Lord's done in your life and what he continues to do, the story he continues to write in this new chapter. It's the same plot. It's the same story. It's a new chapter, and so leaning into that, knowing that there's pain along the way, there's grief along the way, but knowing it's the richest thing that we could ever experience is walking obediently in the Lord.
Yeah, it's a joy to do that and to look at. I got to meet with Pastor Caleb, who's the pastor at Kenton now, and Caleb and I got to work together for about 5 years. I got the joy to hire him and to just see how the church is continuing to really live into who God's called them to be in the community, and how God's using Caleb to do that. My first 15 years there, you look at life, and this is the first time I've been confronted with going, like, I've been in ministry 20 years. I'm 43. And so what do I do with the next 15? So the first 15 felt like it was really just building up.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, maybe it's not so, but it seems right. Like the Lord might just be saying, the last 15, what are you doing to sow into others?
Yeah.
And that's why some people have asked, why, and even people in our district denomination, like, why aren't you a lead pastor somewhere else?
Because culturally, in the American culture, that's you continue to ascend.
That's the progression. Larger church.
Yeah.
What are you? And I don't have an answer for that. I really don't. All I wanted to do was say yes to where we felt like the Lord was leading us, and that happened to be here. And honestly, it's one of those I look at going, well, Lord, if in these next 15 years, what if my ministry is not so much on the ascent of what I'm doing and what you're using me to do to help just build into others in a community, but how are you going to use that to build into others that will go far beyond my next 15 years?
Oh, that is phenomenal, because I'm just talking with a pastor who just retired, and he's sharing with me these words of Ben. He's like, you're all about doing, right? You're in a season of life of doing. And he says, I'm in a season of being. And how we transition, and it happens in different, for all of us, different, what is that season where you transition from all about and all defined by the doing to define about the being, right? And emptying ourselves into others. And man, that's beautiful. So that tees up maybe a conversation for another time.
Yeah,
because
I'll come back. I hope you'll have me back. I haven't sweat through my shirts yet, man. So we're good. You guys have been gracious and not made me dance too much here. So
yeah, and Justin, man, this is our last one together as for you as a staff pastor here. Yeah, I'm sure I would love it. We'll have you on again. I would love it. But just praying for you and the journey ahead as well. Appreciate it. Excited for you and Emily and what the Lord's doing in your life. Yeah.